West Virginia couple sentenced to over 300 years for enslaving adopted children. A deeper look. In one of the most disturbing abuse cases in recent memory, Jean K. Whitefeather and Donald Lance of West Virginia were sentenced to a combined total of 375 years in prison for enslaving and abusing their 5 adopted black children. The case exposed severe flaws in the adoption system and highlighted the devastating impact of racial exploitation in child welfare. The crimes and their impact. Whitefeather and Lance adopted 5 black children, only to subject them to brutal physical, emotional, and psychological abuse. The children were forced to perform intense labor, locked in a shed for extended periods, and denied access to food, education, and medical care. One of the most horrifying aspects was the deliberate racial targeting of the children. Prosecutors emphasized that the couple intentionally adopted black children to exploit them, drawing unsettling comparisons to historical patterns of racial oppression. Authorities only discovered the abuse after one child bravely escaped and alerted authorities. Investigators found the children malnourished, emotionally shattered, and living in conditions that authorities described as inhumane. Why the adoption system failed. This tragic case has sparked renewed conversations about the vulnerabilities within the U.S. adoption system. Critics argue that agencies often prioritize placing children quickly rather than thoroughly vetting prospective parents. Whitefeather and Lance were able to adopt 5 children despite their abusive behavior, raising concerns about gaps in home visitations, post-adoption checkups, and racial sensitivity in placement decisions. Experts believe that in some cases, black children, especially those adopted by white families, may face unique risks when placed in homes where cultural awareness and racial understanding are lacking. Advocates are now calling for stricter screening processes and mandatory cultural training for adoptive parents. The long road to healing. The 5 children are now in protective care and receiving therapy to address the trauma they endured. Child psychologists warn that survivors of prolonged abuse often struggle with severe anxiety, depression, and trust issues well into adulthood. Organizations specializing in trauma recovery are working closely with the children to ensure they receive emotional support and educational resources. Despite the unimaginable hardship, advocates remain hopeful that the children can rebuild their lives with proper care. Legal fallout and proposed changes. In the aftermath of this case, lawmakers and child welfare advocates are pushing for reforms to improve oversight in the adoption process. Proposed changes include enhanced background checks, expanding criminal and behavioral assessments for adoptive families, increased post-adoption monitoring, regular home visits for adopted children to ensure their well-being, cultural sensitivity training, educating adoptive parents on racial identity, cultural awareness, and how to foster healthy relationships with children from different backgrounds. Final thoughts. The sentencing of Jean K. Whitefeather and Donald Lance marks a significant step toward justice, but it also exposes deep flaws in the systems meant to protect vulnerable children. Their horrific actions have fueled a much-needed conversation about how adoption procedures can better safeguard the lives and well-being of children in need.